Let's dive into this newscast with our top focus on India and Canada. The diplomatic relationship between the two countries have further deteriorated. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will not attend Canada-headed COVID foreign ministers grouping next week. Indo-Canadian relations have now taken a hit amidst the farmer protests just outside the capital, New Delhi. The move is seen as India's displeasure over Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's comments on the ongoing farmers' protests. Now, the Canadian Prime Minister this week had extended his support to the agitating farmers. Even after India summoned the Canadian High Commissioner, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reiterated his stance on farmer protests in India, which New Delhi called strictly internal. Trudeau said that Canada will always stand up for right of peaceful protests and human rights around the world. India lodged strong objection to Trudeau's comments on the ongoing protests by farmers in India. New Delhi also warned Canada that bilateral ties between both the countries might suffer due to Canadian Prime Minister's comments. And if continued, such actions would have a seriously damaging impact on ties between India and Canada. India has strongly maintained that the issues relating to Indian farmers constitute an unacceptable interference in India's internal affairs. Canada has a large number of members of the Indian diaspora, many from the northern Indian state of Punjab. This is not the first time the Canadian Prime Minister has landed himself in trouble with Delhi. Earlier, Indian External Affairs Ministry had termed Trudeau's comments as unwarranted and that diplomatic conversations are not misrepresented for political purposes. Let's get in a sense of perspective on the latest that's happening between India and Canada. For that, I'm joined in by India's former ambassador to Canada, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, who's joining us live at this hour from Gurugram. Thank you so much, Ambassador Prakash, for joining our newscast. Now, on Friday, India had warned Canada of serious damage to bilateral ties over Trudeau's remarks, and yet he did not stop. Is this the lowest point for India-Canada ties?
Well, the fact remains that India-Canada ties have been issue-prone, and the separatist issue and the voter appeasement that Canadian politicians engage in fact, there is competitive appeasement of the vote banks, has been a long-standing issue, and the Liberal Party in particular has been more blatant about it. Mr. Trudeau has been appearing at Khalistani events. But after his visit to India, he has toned down a bit. Yet his default position is that, he wants to keep his vote bank intact. And he periodically engages in this uncalled for comments, which is very Trudeau. So he somehow cannot make up his mind what is more important to him. But yes, at the end of the day, for him, the votes that the Sikh community gets him he attaches more importance.
Ambassador, I'm going to also talk about how crucial the vote bank is for him. For that, I'm going to come in just a bit. Now, Trudeau's first set of comments had arrived after his own defence minister, Harjit Singh Sajjan, a known Sikh radical, had tweeted in support of the farmers. Not to forget, at Trudeau's India reception also, the presence of Jaspal Atwal, somebody who was convicted for the murder of a former Punjab minister, did raise eyebrows even then. Now, by honouring such radical elements, do you think Justin Trudeau has ignored Sikh radicalism and instead displayed immaturity and insensitivity towards India? And so, how do you also view the Indian reaction?
Well, there is no doubt about it. One has to be blind not to see it the manner in which you and I are seeing it. You see, what Mr. Trudeau gets out of supporting the Khalistani elements is that the Khalistani elements control some gurudwaras where there are funds. They pump fund into his war chest, the election campaign. They provide foot soldiers for going from door to door. And It so happens that about 700,000 strong Sikh community is concentrated in a few pockets in Canada, and they can impact the outcome of 8 to 12 parliamentary seats. And that in the Canadian system is very important because we have to, let's recall that Trudeau heads a minority government. There is chance of a midterm poll, and these seats will be very crucial. So for him, political expediency comes first and foremost.
Fair enough. Very well said, Ambassador. And having said that, I'm going to come back to you in just a bit. Let's also enlighten our viewers about where, as far as the diplomatic ties are concerned between India and Canada, where do they stand as of now? Now, the ties between India and Canada continue to soar. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has reiterated his stance on India's farmer protests. He has said that Canada will always stand up for right of peaceful protest and human rights around the world. Listen in.
Recognizing the news coming in India about the protest by farmers. The situation is concerning, and we're all very worried about family and friends. I know that's the reality for many of you. Let me remind you, Canada will always be there to defend the right of peaceful protest. We believe in the importance of dialogue, and that's why we've reached out through multiple means directly to the Indian authorities to highlight our concerns.
Now, India has warned that that ties between both the countries might suffer due to Canadian Prime Minister's comments, and if continued, such actions would have a seriously damaging impact on the ties between the two countries. New Delhi has strongly maintained that the issues relating to Indian farmers constitute an unacceptable interference in India's internal affairs. While the Canadian Prime Minister has expressed concern over the situation in India, he has not shown the same commitment to the democratic right to protest when it came to indigenous people in Canada. Let's give you a quick rewind to February 2020, when the Canadian government had removed Indigenous activists from a railway line in Ontario, where activists were protesting against a natural gas pipeline. The blockade had been forcibly removed by the police on Trudeau's direction. Police officers back then had cracked down on the protests, and several demonstrators were reportedly arrested. Back in February, Trudeau had given this warning to the protesters to end the protests.
Canadians have been patient. Our government has been patient. But it has been 2 weeks, and the barricades need to come down now.
And so, respecting internal affairs of a democratic country, New Delhi had refrained from commenting on the protests in Canada. But by reacting to the farmers' protest in India, Canada has discounted this cardinal rule. Canada has a large number of members of the Indian diaspora, many from the northern Indian state of Punjab. Many say that Trudeau's meddling in India's affairs is part of a political strategy and an attempt to appease the key Sikh vote bank in his country. Let us also tell you that Canada is home to around 700,000 Sikhs, and Trudeau has more Sikh ministers in his cabinet than even Prime Minister Narendra Modi. India's relationship with Trudeau has been rocky in recent years. Trudeau had faced a series of snubs from the Narendra Modi government during his visit to India in 2018 amid India's concerns over Sikh radicalism in Canada. And so let's quickly go back to Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, who is joining us live from Gurugram for more insight on this news story. Ambassador, how do you assess the sharp contrast between Trudeau's support to India's agitating farmers and his own administration's treatment of Canada's Indigenous people who protested the gas pipeline project earlier this year?
One word, Akanksha, and it's called hypocritical. There is no other word. His support, his comments, his concern is contrived and it is selective. Let me put it in context. Canada is one of the most strident critics of India's minimum support price program. And Canada has been taking it up in WTO also. Now, on the one hand, they oppose it. But when it comes to the Sikh farmers, they suddenly develop amnesia. And this is nothing but political opportunism. And if I may, I would slightly disagree with the observation that India had snubbed Mr. Trudeau. India had extended all courtesies to Mr. Trudeau. Maybe there was a gap between expectations he had. But as far as India is concerned, every courtesy was extended to the guest. I have no doubt about it.
All right, fair enough, Ambassador. Having said that, there are sections of political lobbies who are saying that the entire reaction coming in from India has been an overreaction. Do you think India has overreacted? How do you weigh in on India's reaction?
Well, yes, thank you for asking me that. You have just narrated how they cracked down on the protests of the First Nations. Now, if India had at that time commented, India will not do that. We are the largest democracy. We lead by example. But if India had commented on that and said that we support it, what would have been the Canadian reaction? There is a very fundamental principle of international relations that you do not comment on internal affairs of other countries. Now, without understanding the ground realities, without caring to follow what is the right course of action, Mr. Trudeau and members of his cabinet have been blatantly engaging in political opportunism, which is something that no country can accept, and certainly not India.
Absolutely, and perhaps now is the time when Canada needs to take the right actions when it comes to addressing the ties between the two countries, because they are souring pretty fast. For now, thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us on our newscast.